The Plot Against America on HBO depicts an alternate 1940s. I'm Riley Chow of Gold Derby, here with its costume designer, Jeriana San Juan. Now, what was the biggest liberty that you took with this being an alternate history?
That's an interesting question. The alternate history aspect is used with liberty, and then also we were very conservative about it because the idea is that this could have been America's history. So in order to kind of keep the reality in that, I really didn't stray too far from the equation of typical costume for the period. I took a few licenses, just small ones, in more curating the color palette in order to really create a mood. We were very careful to control the color through the entirety of the series, specifically with the color red. Being very conservative with it at first and kind of creating an identity for the color red that it really represented fascism in a very obvious way. And it starts to reveal itself and then starts to grow and starts to appear in little notions here and there, desaturating the palette as we moved through the story. And as the kind of pulse quickens and the tension grows, it was a way for us to kind of navigate the story and create a mood, a kind of unconscious mood to kind of support the story that was happening.
Okay, so you talked about this progression. How is your work affected by having different directors and different production designers for the two halves of the show while you stayed on for the duration?
That's another great question, actually. Having two different directors was a really kind of wild experience because it really was about completely shifting focus on the lens which we were telling this story. Minky and Tommy both work very differently in their approach in terms of how they use costume as a tool in storytelling. So that was kind of a fun exercise in doing a continuous story with two directors. That being said, it was really about completely shifting my point of view as a costume designer. I sort of went, at the beginning, we really was trying to set a scene. We're really trying to set the story, and you sort of walk right into a little slice of life in Weequahic, New Jersey, and you're meeting a nice working class family, and you really want to get the sense that it's just another day in America, and to do that, the way in which we were telling it was much more warm. So the colors are in fact very warm, and we chose colors that are specifically identifiable with American history and with Americana. I went to images that were Norman Rockwell images, and Minky was very involved in the design process and really curating the image that we were going to see on screen. And then as we move into the second half of the series, working with Gina and with Tommy, it was really about more, utilitarian, practical approach in terms of what costume was servicing. It was continuing to service a shift in that mood, and it was continuing to kind of be used as a tool visually, but instead of sort of endorsing this kind of sweet family image, the visual focus was really, the direction was to move it towards building tension and building a mood, and very practical, as in these people are wearing the same clothes. You'll see a shift that all of a sudden Evelyn and Bengelsdorf are wearing brand new dresses and suits, and everything's made of silk and pretty opulent, and they're sort of upwardly mobile, and we see a huge shift in that the family's in fact wearing the same clothes that they were in this earlier half of the series, and the clothes are actually much more downtrodden and threadbare and mended and washed and that was very intentional. And so it was an interesting experiment to sort of be the through line between both of those things shifting between part one and part two. But I think kind of like a weird, exciting experiment for me, because I got to sort of have an opportunity to shift the way in which I was doing my storytelling as a costume designer.
Another through line, I'd say, is the creators, David Simon and Ed Burns. And you have no history with them, and you also have no prior credits with HBO. So how did you get this job without connections?
How did I get this job without connections? I got a lot of everything in my life without connections. That's something I'm actually very proud of. I actually identified with this story so much because when I read about first generation American family, it's exactly my story. But instead of being Jewish, which actually I'm half Jewish, I'm Cuban. My family is Cuban. So I think having that sort of, in access, or whatever the word is, not having the road paved for me in this industry has really made me maybe kind of toughen my skin and made me a little bit more savvy and tough. I mean, I got my first job in costume by looking up the word costume in the Yellow Pages way back when. So initially I did get this meeting with Minky, Spiro, and Nina Noble. They had seen my work on Damnation and on The Get Down. And I think they specifically were interested because I had, in The Get Down, I kind of took a period show and really kind of gave it such an aesthetic point of view and really kind of a life that was not so sort of historical, I guess you could say. I really enjoy in approaching period work to still, tell truth to the story, but also be an active designer in the process and actively kind of choosing which colors to use and why I'm using those colors, making it relevant to a contemporary audience was something that was important in The Get Down and also important in this. So I think there was a symmetry there that they saw. But we just had a great meeting. I honestly, in my first meeting, was just talking a lot about my own experience as a first generation American and how there was a lot that was important to tell this story that was meaningful for me, that was about kind of keeping this family very distinctly American. And I think that kind of spoke to Minky's vision for the show and to David Simon and Nina Noble's vision. It was important that the American audience, or really any audience, saw this family as first and foremost American and not necessarily as, quote unquote, immigrants or, not of this world and not of this country. And that was just a really kind of my thesis in going in for that first meeting. And then it led to subsequent meetings, but getting to meet Tommy and getting to meet David, I really started to, I think, sink my teeth into the point of view that they were coming from, and in telling the story and in bringing Philip Roth's book to life. It really was about keeping it relevant and keeping it fresh and allowing an audience a chance to really see themselves in one of these characters. And that was extremely important to me. And I think that's kind of how I got the job, I guess.
Yeah, and what references did you take from the novel upon which the show is based?
Well, the largest reference that I took from the book was probably just maybe it was the overall story and the point of view in which the story was being told. When you read Philip Roth's book, it's written from young Philip, the youngest son in the family. It's written from his point of view. And that was one of my first questions to David Simon and to Minky and to Tommy, was really about how to tell the story and the point of view in which we were looking at this family. You know, were we outsiders looking in? Were we a member of the family? Were, like, in terms of visually, were we sort of neutral? You know, if we're looking at the story in the way the book is written, it's really all through Philip's eyes. So he's really seeing his mother as this very maternal, loving, sort of haloed, you know, creature, and he's looking at his father as a strong, you know, wage earner and you know, kind of superhero in some ways. The way that he's looking at his brother, I mean, the way that the angle kind of changes in the way that I'm going to dress those people. And so for me, the book was a really great inspiration in the way that Philip Roth specifically writes is so visual. He's so intensely visual when he writes. And when I had read the book, that was one of the biggest things that I walked away from, was just how eloquently Philip Roth walks through a space and really decorates it so visually, in just the way that he describes the light and the way he describes his mother's favorite color and how she approaches, you know, the sort of dressing her home and the fastidiousness in which she keeps everything clean and hangs dry the laundry and does all the cooking and the bills. And you can kind of really visually see things when he writes. So I think I took away from the book a lot of little notions that he's written in the book. And I did that in part to, you know, because my own view had been colored by the book, but also I did that in part to pay some tribute for people who had read the book. So when you're doing a project that comes from a piece of literature, there's a very good chance that people who are going to be interested in it have read the book. So I wanted to make sure that I was sort of coloring the world in the way that I had read it.
All right, so we're coming up on Emmy season. So what episode from the show are you submitting for consideration in the period costumes category, and how did you choose that one?
Well, I think I chose episode 1 for when we were submitting for Emmys, and the reason being because it really is that moment in its story where before the characters say anything, the clothes have to speak for themselves. And the clothes have to really tell you so much story behind each one of these characters. And when you're meeting Bess for the first time, you know, just in making all of those little decisions along the way in design, when I was, you know, designing what dress she would wear for Shabbos and what would be her nicest dress, her nicest summer dress that was still appropriate to wear at home, cook dinner in, put her children to bed in, do laundry in, but also be her nice dress to dress up for the meal. Also some way to kind of allow you to meet the characters, again, uniquely and distinctly American, first and foremost. Allow you to see her figure, see that she's still a sweet, loving mom, and also very much, you know, a woman who is aware of herself in the room. She's a smart woman. So all of those little decisions and in choosing those very first costumes, those costumes have to do so much work in sort of cueing you into their entire backstory as you're just walking in, you know, on a Friday night, and you're really kind of meeting all the characters. It was really important. All those costumes were very important, and that's kind of why I landed there.
And finally, can you tell us about the upcoming Halston miniseries that you're working on for Netflix?
So yes, right now I am costume designing a miniseries for Netflix called Halston, and it is based on the life and career of Roy Halston Froick, sorry. Yeah, the series is pretty phenomenal in terms of costume. I'm very excited about it and very proud of it. For me, it really marries a lot of my background in fashion, and I studied at FIT. I studied Halston as a designer. I never really dived into his personal life so much when I was in school, but now I, since read all the materials that there are to read, that's a big part of what I do, and any project is research. So the research for this has been just such a joy, and Ewan McGregor is starring in the series. It'll be airing, I don't know when. And yeah, it's just it's a blast to work on. Daniel Minahan is the director, and he and I are like two peas in a pod. It's really a joy to work with him. And yeah, I don't want to tell you too much. I am afraid I'm going to give something away, but it's going to be definitely a spectacle of fashion, and will take us basically through Halston's entire life, from basically the late 50s, early 60s up until the end of his life.
Yeah, that was great. All right. Well, we look forward to seeing that, and best of luck at the Emmys this summer, Jeriana. And to our viewers, you can log on to goldderby.com to log your Emmy predictions, and also visit our YouTube channel to see more interviews with people from the Plot Against America.